All right. Thank you all for joining. Thanks for responding to the question in the chat. So yeah, my name is Layla. I am an immigration lawyer. And yeah, just to give you a little bit of background on how this started, this is really just an ad hoc mutual aid project. We are trying to use the tools that we have at our disposal to respond to the crisis going on in Afghanistan right now. We started just a couple of us Afghan American lawyers trying to figure out ways to respond, especially with our own families, and find pathways for folks who aren't eligible for the main pathways that have existed for the last many years. And we are organizers, so that's why, again, this is very ad hoc. We are doing this in a volunteer capacity, and we appreciate all of you coming and joining us in your volunteer capacity as well. I know some of you might be able to do this as lawyers with your own firms and things like that, but many of us are here just as volunteers giving our time for this. We organize with a group called Afghan Diaspora for Equality and Progress, and we are here mostly in our personal capacities, although we all work at different organizations. We're not necessarily here representing those organizations today. So I'll go ahead and pass it to Ogai to give a little bit more context for everyone.
Hi all, I'm Ogai. And again, thank you all for being here and for responding so quickly to this training and to the direct need that's the direct needs right now. So like Layla said, this is just a group of us coordinating a project, and we're hoping to get you guys all trained, and then we're going to match volunteer legal workers with families seeking humanitarian parole for their loved ones in Afghanistan. So our project is really, really limited in scope. We're not working on direct evacuations. We're only helping people file humanitarian parole applications. And there's, filling out this application doesn't give people a guarantee that they will get out of Afghanistan, but it is an option. It is something that a lot of folks are trying right now. It's a thing that a lot of folks are trying for their families right now. And just as a note, I think it's really, really important to keep in mind that things are changing so quickly right now in Afghanistan, and especially at the Kabul airport, that we're going to put out this information. We're going to get you all trained, but something could change in an hour. Something could change by the time we are done with this presentation. So we encourage you to look up resources, keep up with the news, and we will also, if we see something big come through, we will also email you with updates as well. And again, as a reminder, this is being recorded. We're going to use this video for training purposes here, but then it will also be publicly available. We will email you all the public link. So just keep that in mind for as we go through this. So I'll pass it on to Susan.
Thank you. Hey, all, my name's Susan. I'm also an immigration attorney. And just wanted to remind folks, so many of you are joining because you signed up through the Afghan Resources Gmail account to be paired with families or folks who are seeking to apply for humanitarian parole for their loved ones. For those of you who want to be involved in sort of that particular project, the way today's training is going to work is we'll first do a general training from Seema, who's really graciously volunteered her time to give us some background on the humanitarian parole application process. So folks who are just tuning in to learn about humanitarian parole, you can just listen to that part of the training, but then following that, we'll walk through the logistics for folks who want to work specifically with the project we're all a part of, to be paired with folks who will be seeking humanitarian parole. And just a reminder to that group of people who are going to be working with us, we, again, ad hoc group of volunteers, we're going to be matching you with people who are going to be applying pro se. So we're not asking folks to enter representation or formally take anyone on as a client. You're obviously, depending on your capacity and you know, where you're situated in terms of your work. We encourage that if you're able to, but understand if you can't. We're not providing malpractice insurance or any other kind of liability coverage, but you know, just pairing folks off to do pro se assistance. Regardless, though, we do encourage you, and we'll talk about this later, even though it's just pro se assistance on these applications, to help folks with follow-up, both with USCIS, with the US government, but also with, you know, sort of the logistical immigration law piece of it, but also with advocacy to elected officials, which we'll talk about. So that, and yeah, that is my sort of foregrounding, and I'm going to pass it off to Roxana.
I'm going to briefly introduce Seema, who, just by way of agenda, Seema's going to dive into about 45 minutes of a training specifically on humanitarian parole. She has a badass slide presentation prepared for everyone. And then we're going to come back at the end around 12 p.m. Pacific time for a final 30 minutes of just walking through the logistics of, if you are here to be matched with a family through the Afghan Resource Project, how we're going to do that. And the step-by-step of what that process is going to look like, what the expectations of you are, and be available to answer questions about that matching and legal aid like delivery process. If you already are in touch with families, you already are working with clients, amazing. Feel free to hop off at the end of Seema's presentation. So many of you probably already know Seema, but Seema Alizadeh is an immigration attorney at the Parsi Quality Center, which is a nonprofit organization based in San Jose. They serve low-income Middle Eastern and South Asian community members of the Bay Area and Los Angeles with both legal and social services. They've been around for a very long time, and we're very, very excited to get to present to you, Seema, for today's training.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Are we going to put up the slides? I just want to say thank you so much. Is it my turn yet?
It's your turn.
Because I thought someone was going to start with the slides, and I just want to tell everybody that just have to click off this. The reason my camera is off is because I've had a pretty horrendous 3 days of assigning cases to folks, and you all don't want to see what I look like right now. I am here to help you. If you've ever attended one of my trainings, they're really kind of fun in that I simplify things. And for those who I saw in the chat box that some of you are well versed in this, I apologize ahead of time, but I do want to make sure that those who are not well versed in immigration law are able to do these cases. So we are going to just jump right in. And if you have a question, type it in the box. Be really succinct, because it's hard for me to multitask sometimes with those chat boxes. Okay, so we are going to learn today how to file humanitarian parole for Afghans, because it's an emergency, folks, and we need to get started as soon as possible. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the Humanitarian Parole Program is administered by the HAB, or the Humanitarian Affairs Branch of International Operations. So you don't really need to know anything about that, except you're corresponding with this or this agency, and they will be, it'll say HAB on the notices that you get. And they have a different address than other offices within USCIS and other offices. Parole is a discretionary authority that allows for the temporary entry of individuals into the United States for urgent humanitarian reasons or for significant public benefit. It does not constitute an admission into the USA. So next slide. Oh yeah, the PowerPoint will be shared. Some of those general questions, other folks, can you answer them? And then if it's a legal question, you can put legal question and then I'll answer it. Who can apply for humanitarian parole? Anyone can make an application on behalf of someone who's outside of the United States and has an urgent need to enter the country. They don't need to be a family member of the person to be a requester for humanitarian parole for another human being. Individuals may also self-petition for humanitarian parole if they're outside the United States. Today we will be talking about what happens when, there's going to be a requester. So someone's going to be requesting another individual. and then there's going to be a financial sponsor. So we're going to be talking about three parties here. We're going to be talking about the Afghan evacuee, which is the beneficiary of that application. We're going to be talking about a requester, which is a U.S. person, which is ideally a U.S. citizen or a green card holder. And we're going to be talking about, they can be the same person. And we're going to be talking about the financial sponsor, which the financial sponsor and the requester can be the same person or different persons. Okay, so the jurisdiction. Just as way of background, USCIS, ICE, and CBP exercise concurrent parole authority. So USCIS through HAB authorizes parole for aliens outside the United States for many reasons, including humanitarian reasons. ICE authorizes parole aliens outside of the United States for many reasons, including law enforcement and intelligence purposes. And CBP authorizes parole. And you've probably heard of folks like taking their parole packets and to point of entries and presenting them to CBP. So this presentation is going to be focused on filing with USCIS, which is HAB. However, if you do fill one up and you have a person, an Afghan evacuee who is approaching a point of entry, they can present that. If you happen to fill one up for someone and they happen to then board a flight or to evacuate to like Qatar or somewhere else, they can always let CBP know at the point of entry that they have this application. They're going to be paroled anyway if they're at CBP, but if they're going to be taken somewhere else, this parole application would assist them. Okay, so the next slide. Okay, so we have CBP clearance locations, pre-clearance locations. I'm not going to get into this. I just wanted you to have this, and you will all have access to these slides, so don't panic while you're taking notes or something, because I just want to let you know by way of background that there are, generally 16 locations worldwide for CBP pre-clearance at airports, and the closest pre-clearance location to Afghanistan is Abu Dhabi. And then there's also CBP land borders. We're not going to really get into that because due to COVID-19, many of those land borders, such as Mexico, are going to be closed down for entry. Okay. So this is why you're here. You have generously offered your time to file a humanitarian parole for an individual in great need. Sorry, one moment. Okay, we're going to get to the questions at the end. Filing humanitarian parole with USCIS. So we're going to talk about filing humanitarian parole applications with USCIS. But, as I just told you before, if your client is on the move and can get to a CBP checkpoint, they can present the packet to CBP there as well. You must file one I-131 packet for each individual beneficiary or Afghan evacuee. So for example, you have a family of 5, you're going to do 5 I-131 packets. You're going to do 5 packets, individual packets. The fee is $575. They can pay it by check or money order payable to U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Ideally, because you're working virtually with folks, you could supply them with the G-1450 credit card form. Before I go on, for the other panelists, do the attendees to this training have the checklist, or have they not been given that yet?
It hasn't been shared yet, but it will be shared. We can share it now if you'd like.
Yeah, let's just briefly show it and then we'll go back to the slide. I just want to show everyone. So it's just so everyone knows, this is such a confusing time for folks that I did want to let you know that you will have access to the best material. You're going to have a checklist. It's an amazing checklist. It's going to tell you what your packet needs, and you're going to have access to these slides. So I don't see the checklist yet. Are you bringing it up?
I'm sharing, one moment.
Okay. Yeah, so going to these questions that I have, do folks have to pay $575 for infants or folks under the age of 18? Yes. It's $575 per person, no matter the age, unfortunately. Okay. Okay, I'm just gonna continue on this slide while we get that up. Oh, there we go. So you're gonna get this checklist, and I'm not gonna go over this checklist right now, but I just want to show it to you. And so it says like what you have to do. You have to have an expedite cover sheet. You're gonna be having a G1145, which is an e-notification form. You're going to have a G28. If you are going to go on as an attorney, most of you are going to do pro se. You will not have that form. There will be a fee, either by way of a credit card form or check or money order, or they will do a fee waiver. We have a link to all the different forms here. There is, so then the main form for travel document for Humanitarian Parole is the I-131 application. And then it shows you here, there's going to be a copy of the photo ID of the individual, which is called a Tashkara, and a diary. Go down, please, to the next page. Yeah, second page, please. Okay, so we have the passport photos of the individual. It's a little bit tricky for them to get this, but we have an explanation of how it can be done on this checklist. Many attorneys have successfully gotten the passport style photos. We're going to go over all those supporting documents and everything within this discussion. There's going to be a statement regarding the urgent humanitarian need of the person. It doesn't have to be long. And it explains here what type of documentation, any case-specific documentation that they have themselves, like if they worked for a particular organization or agency or place. And then if they had any applications that have already been filed, you want to put receipt notices if they have any. And then there's going to be Form I-134, which is the affidavit of support for the financial sponsor. And it talks about which documents that you would include in that. And then you are going to submit it, next page, to one of these two addresses. Preferably, you're going to go with the courier address and do express. I know it's expensive, but you will advise the person to do it the fastest route. And then it's going to be, we're going to talk about on this checklist that you're going to get post-submission process. So go down a bit, and then so that's it. We can go back to the slides. So you will all get this checklist. So I wanted to put everyone's mind at ease before we jump in, that you're going to have everything that you need, okay? Alrighty. So you could type your legal questions here at the end. I'm going to try my best to go through them. Okay, so when you do signatures, we went to the fee. If you can't do the fee, you're going to do a 912 fee waiver. All signatures have to be, they could be copies of wet signatures, but USCIS will not accept the electronic style signature. You're going to have 2 passport photographs of the beneficiary. It's also good to advise them ahead of time that having that digital photo saved, because when you have the digital photograph saved, then they will be able to possibly use that for the DS-160, which is a non-immigrant visa application that they have to do later on. We're going to get into all of that. Next slide. You guys, most of the questions you're asking in the chat box, I'm going to get to them. So the USCIS humanitarian packet is going to contain, we've already gone over it, but this is, we're going to re-go over it for those folks just so it just really seeps in. We're going to have 2 passport size photographs of the beneficiary. There's websites that can be used in order for this to be sent to a US person. They can also go to like Photo Booth app, and I know that the group here has a guide to printing passport photos at home. There's G-1145 is an e-notification form. This is very, very important. It has to go on top of everything. This is a really simple form that just tells USCIS to e-notify you when it receives your packet. And this is important because when they get an e-notification, it contains the case number or receipt number. This is what we need in order to expedite the packet, because not only will you hopefully be helping to file the packet, but you will be helping to expedite it, hopefully, or notifying the applicant how to do so. The forms that I have highlighted on this slide are the ones that need signatures, and I'm telling you this ahead of time, so when you make contact with the US person, you can go ahead and send them these form signatory pages. And typically how I do it in my office is I have all the signatory pages already scanned on a file, and I can just go ahead and send those files over to the US person to sign. So there's going to be you're not going to have a Form G28 unless you decide to go on record as the attorney. I do recommend you do that, but you don't have to. But if you do, you would be getting a signature from the US person, the applicant on Form I-131 on a G28. Form 912 is the fee waiver form. If you don't use it, obviously you don't need a signature for that. And a G1450 is going to be the credit card form. And you have to be really careful about that form, because if they put the billing address wrong or anything wrong on that form, it will make the packet come back. So double checking the credit card number, the billing address, and everything has to be accurate. Form I-131 is the main application for the humanitarian parole. You're going to be submitting that with supporting documents. And then Form I-134 is the affidavit of support. Just as another reminder again, the signatures can be wet signatures that are scanned, not electronic signatures. Next slide. Okay. So we're going to make sure that not only are these packets being filed with USCIS, but that after they are filed, they are expedited. Expediting it sounds harder than it really is. It's really not a hard process. Basically, in order to expedite a case, first you want to ensure that your packet has the word expedite requested on your cover letter and on that brightly colored page that you're going to put on top of your I-131, but behind that really important e-notification form, which is G-1145. You are going to make a bold colored page that says Afghanistan humanitarian parole expedite requested due to Taliban death threats, okay? On a maybe yellow page or whatever color you have at your office that stands out. Once you get that USCIS case number, and I think the group is going to make like a checkout list for a checkout for a pro se person that, you know, will tell them how to do this themselves. But if you're taking on the case, you would call the USCIS case number, or you would call the USCIS customer service number, excuse me, and you would give them your case number, and you would ask them. So this is how you get through, because getting through customer service, I have my own trick for doing this. You call the number, you hit the prompts for InfoPass. So whenever it says InfoPass, you want an InfoPass appointment, you go ahead and you hit that button. And when you do that, you get to a live agent. They honestly don't care if you're getting an InfoPass appointment. As soon as they say hello, you introduce yourself and you say, I'm calling to expedite a case. This is the case number. And then you should have the file handy, because oftentimes they'll ask you for the address of the applicant and other information that would be handy inside the file. Once you do that, they will go through their long spiel about humanitarian, which reason, and they have their expedite criteria, and they have to read you the whole criteria, unfortunately. Once they read it to you, you will say that you are going to expedite due to humanitarian reason, and you tell the officer any specific reasons. They note it down, and then they give you a confirmation number. You're going to write that confirmation number down on that receipt notice that you have, and you can do 3 cases at a time per call. So once you have the receipt number that you got by USCIS and you have this expedite confirmation number, you can go ahead and use congressional resources to further make sure your expedite goes through. Sometimes you'll also get something, a contact either by email or mail asking you to send evidence of your expedite. In this situation, I don't think we're going to get those, but if you do, there will be like a fax number to send the information regarding your expedite. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to just jump into the I-131, which is the main application for travel document. Reason I'm going to go into that because you might have more nerves about this right now, and you just want to make sure you're doing these right. Make sure that the edition date and on that checklist that we just showed you a little bit ago, it has all the links to the forms. Make sure that the edition date on your form, you want to check the bottom left of the application. Don't look at the top right. It could say it's expired today. That doesn't matter. You're looking at the bottom left of your application, and this edition date, 4/24/19, should be written there. Then you know you have the right edition of the form. The form obviously on the website is the current edition. This form is not only used for humanitarian parole, it is used for other applications such as reentry permits and different advanced paroles and refugee travel documents, but you will be using this form for humanitarian parole. So going over, once again, just to reiterate, we're going to have one beneficiary, which is the Afghan evacuee, and one United States citizen or legal permanent resident requester. The requester can be different from the financial sponsor. It can also be the same person. For example, you can have a United States citizen mother as a requester on the form I-131, but a U.S. citizen family friend offers to be the financial sponsor. Yeah, next slide. Okay. Chopped up form I-131. Sorry about that. This is a form I-131. We're looking at half of the form here. We're going to look at them half at a time. So this is the form, as you see on the top right, has that it expires. We're not looking over there, so we're going to look at the bottom left later. The first section, part 1, the top, you just leave it as it is. It's for their own purposes. You start where it says start here. Part 1, information about you. This would be the U.S. or legal permanent resident requester. Okay. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the information about the requester. And if you don't see the addition there, date on the bottom left there, it's just because it got cut off. You're going to have the person's name and address. If they have an A number, which would be located on their green card. If they're a U.S. citizen, you can leave that A number blank. Or if you happen to have their naturalization certificate, you can go ahead and put it in because it's located there as well. The country that this person was born in, their citizenship, their class of admission, and their date of birth and social security number. Next slide. OBKB, here we are. This is really important section. That's why I highlighted it. As I told you before, the form is used for different applications. You're going to be using it for humanitarian parole. So we are going to check off box 1F that says I'm applying for an advanced parole document for a person who is outside the United States. And then we're going to go below. Since we checked box 1F, we're going to provide the name of this individual. This will be the Afghan beneficiary. You're going to write their last name and their first name, their date of birth, Afghanistan, and then the phone number that you have for them. If you don't have a phone number, you can write unknown. It's good to put a phone number. Physical address. This will be the evacuee's address, or if they do not have an address at this time, you will put displaced due to Taliban. Next slide. Okay, this is the other half of that page. Okay, part 3. You see down there, there's our little addition date on the bottom left. There we go. Okay, part 3, a date of intended departure as soon as possible. I'm about, I'm totally, in a bad crisis here. Okay, expected length of time. I put duration of stay, but I put a little arrow because other folks have, suggested that you put indefinite or you write 1 year, or as long as you think it would take for them to apply for their immigration benefit. So do any of those depending on case-by-case basis. Are you or any person included in this application now in exclusion of deportation? You're going to obviously write no, unless they are, which hopefully they're not. And have you ever been issued a reentry permit or refugee travel document? Most likely no. Next slide. Okay, part 3. Where do you want this travel document sent? It's a little bit tricky section, and there's been a lot of back and forth about these sections, frankly. But, and some practitioners have filled this out different, and I'm telling you, sometimes it doesn't matter. I'm going to tell you the way that I would do this. So I would put that it would be the U.S. This will be case by case, just a reminder. If the person has evacuated and is somewhere else, you would put that consulate for that particular location. Like if they got to with an e-visa to India, you might put that. But if most of the people you're going to be serving are in Afghanistan, you're going to put Kabul, Afghanistan, even though currently the U.S. Embassy is closed there. But the reason we're going to put that is because it's going to be properly routed. Okay, we're going to go down, and it says if you check 6 or 7, where should the notice to pick up the travel document be sent? Okay, what I usually do here is I check off to the address shown in part 3. Then in 10A through 10J, I put my own firm's address, my organizational address and name, or the U.S. person. In the case of folks who are doing pro se applications, this will be the U.S. contact. Okay, next slide. Yeah, just to go to this little question in the chat box. Yeah, even though the U.S. Embassy in Kabul might not exist, on September 1st, you're still going to put Kabul there, okay? Okay, so part 4, information about your proposed travel. Purpose of your trip, okay? You can put whatever you want. I'd put their humanitarian emergency, death threats. List the country you intend to visit. I put U.S. Okay, next slide. You're going to skip part 5, folks. That's for reentry permits. Skip that section. Next. Okay, you're going to skip this section. It's about refugee travel documents. Don't worry about skipping sections on this form. Like I said before, this form is used for different types of travel documents. You're using it for the advanced parole, or humanitarian parole. Here it says advanced parole, and we're going to use it for that purpose. Part 7, you're going to fill out. How many trips did you intend to use this document? We're going to put 1 trip, and we're going to go to the next slide so I can explain that section to you more. Okay, 1 trip, and then you're going to put, if the person intended to receive an advanced parole document is outside the U.S., provide the location that you want us to notify. Again, we're going to put Kabul here. And then where do you want the pickup notice to be sent? Now, before when I used to get these, the notice would be, I have gotten an email before. So, strangely enough, I've gotten an email before. So here I just put to the address shown in part 7. So, and then we would just put the U.S. person or firm name again. Next slide. And folks, if this sounds confusing, don't worry. You're going to have access to these slides. And it's really like just to give you a breath of fresh air about this. I have done one of these, and the example that is going to be shared with you of one that I did is an Iranian case, but I literally did it in in 1 day in my office along with doing other consults. So it's not, the biggest time consuming thing for you is just going to be that contact with the person and getting a few documents and the passport picture and stuff. Other than that, you can turn this around even in 1 day if you make a concerted effort. Okay, So part 8 is going to be the signature of the U.S. requester. We talked about this earlier, that you're going to be scanning and sending that page to the person. They will be signing in the box, and they could use black or blue ink, but it doesn't matter at this point. This is all going to be scanned anyway. And then the date of the signature and their phone number. And then the preparer would be you. Okay. Next section. Okay, so we're done going over the form I-131, so you could feel like you almost did one. Yay. Okay, so supporting documents for form I-131. Okay, all documents. And so we're getting some question like, how robust does the support letter have to be? What do I have to do? I just want you to know something. It doesn't have to be brain surgery, folks. Like, we don't have to make it perfect. We also depends on how much time you have. You just want to make sure that this will be different. Some of the supporting documents that are for that case specific matter that you have will be different than other people who are filing. You're just going to want to make it very clear what the emergency is, because there's already a crisis there. But if you can add any additional information about why that specific person is the target, it would be really recommended. Okay, so first, all documents that are not in English have to have a certified translation. Now, on that checklist that we showed you, and I think that we never got to the bottom of that checklist. Is it really time consuming if we look at that really quick? Yeah. Okay. So I'm just refer to the checklist. The checklist is going to have an example of how you do a certified translation. If you had somebody, and if you get paired, for instance, with a diary interpreter who's willing to type up somebody's Tuscara or document that they have, at the very bottom, they will certify that, yes, they've done a correct translation and they have command of the diary language, okay? The example how to do that is available on that checklist. You can also give that information to the applicant so that they can start getting their stuff translated if it already is not. From my experience, many documents are already translated. Okay, the photo identification that you need for the beneficiary is would be like their passport if available, ideally, but they might not have it. A Tuscara. A Tuscara is an Afghani identity document that serves the purpose as a birth certificate. And then you're going to have a signed declaration of sorts from the petitioner regarding this emergent situation. And that would be actually something else that you would need them to sign. And so this could be specific to that particular case. You does not have to be long, folks. Like when I do them, it's 1 page for me. Okay, this is like a big emergency. You just need to put down, okay, they've worked here, they've done this, just really, really, really summarize this, and then have them sign it. Country conditions, security alerts, always good to put in, even though, I know it's like, feels like duh, the USCIS should already know there's an emergency. You still should bolster it with a little bit of those conditions. So we've put a link for a security alert for you. Yeah, there's a question about when you say declaration, can it be a paragraph or two, or declaration format? It could also be a paragraph or two. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the I-134 affidavit of support, okay, for those folks, I don't know how many of you have done an I-864 affidavit of support, which I call the hardcore affidavit. It's like a real affidavit of support. I'm not, don't hold me accountable for this, but I call it the soft affidavit. It's generally not legally enforceable. That's why USCIS also takes those financial information that's submitted with an I-134 a little bit more. They look at it a little bit more typically. And in this situation, we do not know. Things might change, as the team said in the beginning, and we might have a whole different type of guidance about this. But at this point, we still need financial sponsors. The financial sponsor has to be a US citizen or an LPR. You can tell them that if they're nervous about this, you can tell them, hey, look, They're not generally legally enforceable. It is a legal contract, however, it's a very soft affidavit. So the standard is 125% of the poverty guidelines. There's a link of how to find that here. So basically how to determine if that person is eligible, you would click on that link and then you would go to the 125% category and then see how many family members they have and how many people they are in their household by looking at asking them how many people they claim as a dependent. And then when you add that beneficiary to that number, then you would determine that. But if you have like a family of 6 people, you don't have to add 6 people to that number. You can add just 1 because they're going to be an affidavit of support for that one person at a time. That person hasn't entered. So in determining that number, for example, if we have a family of 4, they want to bring in an Afghan evacuee that have a family of 5, we're only going to consider them as a family of 5. Not a family of 9 or whatever. So, so we have the link for that. You need 1 I-134 affidavit of support for each beneficiary being sponsored, even if it's a duplicate copy. So once, like if you get a family of 3, you're going to just make copies. They're going to make copies of that same thing, okay? And just because what signatures can be scanned anyway, they can just do 3 packets of that. Supporting documents from the financial sponsors may be, and these are not the ones with asterisks are required. Yeah, so there's a question about 100% of the poverty guideline versus 125%. There's a little bit of an argument there because there's some people say it's 100%, and I think there are some things online indicating it's 100% of poverty guidelines. And then some say it's 125. I would just play it safe and do 125, but if you really think it's 100% of poverty guidelines, go ahead. I looked that up too, and there was just some conflicting information about that. Anyhow, U.S. passport and U.S. green card, okay, you're going to have a copy. So if the person's a financial sponsor, you'll have that information. That's required. I usually like to put their driver license to show their U.S. residency. You don't have to do that. A W-2 1099 for the most recent tax year, federal 1040 for the most recent tax year, and the last 6 paycheck stubs, not required but ideal. Verification of employment letter, business license, not required but ideal. Depends how much time you have, folks. The person who signs the affidavit of support, like again, we've talked about this a few times, can be different from the person who signs the I-131 form. Next slide. Okay, yeah, so somebody asked a really good question here. Thanks, Catherine. I thought I read that you can have more than 1 sponsor. Is that correct? Yes, you can have up to 2 I-134s. Okay, I hope that makes sense to folks. Okay, so post-filing tips. Okay, you or the applicant will get a receipt number by email if you were, filed that G1145 and you put it on top of everything. That's your e-notification form. Very important, that e-notification form, because we are in a crisis situation. We have to make sure that we get that receipt number as soon as possible. Okay, second point, expedite request must be made through USCIS. Then if you can, or the US applicant can share those numbers with the congressional reps. So once you get that expedite going, we talked about this before in an earlier slide, you will then try to push through congressional channels to go ahead and do that. And some folks are just like, once they get the case number, now the person can go on evacuation flights because they have a case number. So they could take a copy, for instance, of their packet, and you can input their information because now they have a pending case, okay? So some people are handling them that way. It depends really how much advocacy time you have. Dedicate your time to get these pushed through. Okay, so later, and I don't want you to stress about this right now because the purpose of this training was to train you how to file the humanitarian parole with USCIS. There can be a separate training on these post-filing tips, so we're not going to go deep in them, but just so you know ahead of time, that if this gets assigned and it proceeds as it should and it gets approved, then they would be invited to fill out a DS-160, which is the online non-immigrant visa application. There's a checklist and exemplar link here that you can go to later just to get a heads up, and you could send that to the person you're working with as well. And just another note, it's okay to list KABUL as the designated consular post on the DS-160 because Department of State can pull up these applications at any consulate, and you are able to switch this later. Okay, next slide. Okay. Explaining parole, I thought this was an important slide because, you know, you may not be well versed in parole and you're doing these applications, and these are some talking points really with you and the person you're serving, to the US applicant or an Afghan evacuee if you are speaking to them. Humanitarian parole is discretionary. We cannot guarantee the success of their filing. We will do our best, but we can't guarantee. Parole is not an admission. They should explore next steps with an immigration attorney when and if they are able to arrive in the United States. Parolees can apply for asylum or file for other avenues of immigration benefits. Again, they should discuss this with an immigration attorney once they arrive in the United States. Parole duration is discretionary. It can vary case by case between a few months to a year. The U.S. may put in place a special program for Afghans, but we don't have any information of that at this time, although I'm very hopeful. I just wanted to mention that even if they get accepted for parole, they get approved for parole, right at the point of entry, their duration of the parole can be adjusted. This has happened to one of my clients before, that they get a stamp that says it's only 3 months. Well, so parole is not renewable, but a new application has to be refiled, It's called a re-parole, and they have to do another application fee or fee waiver if the applicant has not secured status. For instance, like if they get to the United States and file for asylum, then they will not, once they get that receipt that they have a pending asylum case, they will not have to do a re-parole, or if they have a pending adjustment through a family member, for example. Excuse me. Guidance may change, and this may affect the next steps of their case. So just remind the person you're talking to that, hey, look, you know, right now this is a fluid situation. Things are changing. So there might be a new program in place, just so they know that it's a rocky ground that we're working on right now. Is that the last slide, or I think there's more? Okay. Okay, so as you know, I know that you are all volunteers for this current project. I really commend you on that. If in the course of your work, you know, a lot of times people are so grateful. They'll be like, yeah, my neighbor has a problem. Can you help my neighbor or my friend or my other cousin? If you can always refer them to our program at Parse Equality Center, and I've left the link for you in case you want to refer new cases to us. Next slide. Okay, I got permission from my client to share this with you. So I just want to thank all of you for volunteering, and you're going to make a massive difference. I just have a picture of my client with their first car ride after client just arrived, wife and child just arrived. So I thought I would share that with you to give you hope and to give you some energy in this work. So thank you so much, and I think thank you very much. You're so kind. And if there are any, if there's any specific questions, I have to go back. So maybe somebody.
Seema, I've been collecting the questions, and I have. I don't think we can get to all of them just given time, but I have them sort of queued up in sections. So do you want me to just read them to you?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So there were a few questions on other pathways into the U.S. besides humanitarian parole, and a couple on whether if someone, you know, worked for an agency or had employment connections to the U.S., if they should also be pursuing a special immigrant visa or P2 status.
Yeah, I mean, I think that these questions are outside the scope of this, but I do think that for all of the volunteers, they have to know other avenues, because if for instance you're assigned a case and you realize, oh, this should be an SIV or there's a P2, then I will try my best to get all those links and information to the group so that they can post it on the website that they have. Are you can someone from the group or panelists tell where's all this going to be housed, all this information for the volunteers? Is it going to be housed on that website or?
Yeah, it'll be housed on the Afghan Diaspora for Equality and Progress website. It will go live after this training is done, and we will also upload this video there. So we will send that information out by email to all of the attendees.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate to everybody that if you talk to someone and you realize, oh, they have a pending, because I know the Google form that the group has put together, like, Ugai, I know you had it on your Facebook, I believe, right? So this Google form, it's very well done in terms of like, it's asking if they're saying they do not have a pending case anywhere. But if you think they qualify for a different program, then there are going to be trainings for those. And I've heard that there's going to be SIV, P2, there's going to be trainings. If there's any news on that, I'll make sure to let the panelists know to inform you.
And we can pass on information. There are a couple of trainings already planned for this week.
Oh, yes.
Not by us, by other organizations, but we can pass the training information on. So some questions on the form I-131. So a couple of people asked whether it's a requirement that the requester, and then also for the I-134, the financial sponsor, be a U.S. citizen or a lawful permanent resident.
Yeah, so it's recommended. It's not written anywhere that it has to be, but it's recommended that it is. And that's been the recommendation, just general policy recommendation. If it is not, I would just go ahead and proceed if you have no other avenues.
And for both forms, the I-131 and the I-134, folks asked whether you can use a scanned copy of an ink signature or a wet signature, or whether a wet signature is required.
Okay, so we're going to go over signatures again. I thought I went over signatures, everybody, 4 times. We're going to keep talking about signatures because they're so important. And we're going to have just scanned signatures, folks, but it has to be a wet signature, folks. So that means that just no electronic signature, but it's a copy of the wet signature is all we need for everything. We don't need an actual thing. That's the only good thing that came out of COVID for USCIS. Okay.
And then a couple people asked about documentation for the U.S. requester. So one question was, if the U.S. requester's passport is expired, what other documents can they present? Identity documents? Can they show a U.S. birth certificate?
Yes, absolutely so. You can do anything to prove that this person is a U.S. person.
And in terms of the declaration attached to the I-131, was a question about whether it can just be a couple of paragraphs or whether it should be in declaration form, and then also who the declaration can come from. Can it be from the U.S.-based requester, or does it have to be from the Afghan evacuee?
It's going to be generally from the requester, and it can be in any format that you feel comfortable in, as long as it's signed and attested to.
And for the some questions on the I-134, one person asked if it's required, the form.
That's a really good question. For now, yes.
And you addressed this a little bit, but can there be more than one sponsor? And what do you do in a situation where you're filing with multiple sponsors?
It's not really hard. You just do 2 different I-134s, and you don't have to divvy it up. They just divvy it up themselves. Yeah.
And if we're working with a family or people where they're in a situation where there is no one who they think is able to act as a sponsor, what can we do?
You can do advocacy. Like, I just did some advocacy today, and I found somebody who wanted to be a sponsor, like a complete stranger. They want to be sponsors. There's so many people wanting to help, and just don't forget the poverty guidelines are not high, folks. A lot of people can be financial sponsors and make a big difference in people's lives. So you can ask around, ask friends. Some people don't want to do it because they're handing their financial information over. So At that point, you can be, if you're doing it pro se, I would really recommend that you leave it up to that per applicant. If you're doing it on your own and you find an advocacy group, you could be the one to file it. You don't have to hand the I-134 over to the person.
And there's a question in the chat also related to the I-134, if whether the sponsor needs to show bank account information or whether pay stubs is sufficient. Yeah,
Bank
what
information I would not put unless you're using assets. I would put pay stubs. And you don't need them if you really, I mean, we're on a time crunch, folks. If I got us, I mean, I'm doing one tomorrow, so I'm just going to put in the 2020 1040. That's all I got. And a letter from the employer. That's all I have. And I'm going to go for it and file it. Not going to worry about it.
And some questions on the fee waiver form. So for folks who, you know, you can either file this with the $575 filing fee, or you can attempt to get a fee waiver if the person can't afford the fee. Can you speak on what, you know, how much that would asking for a filing fee waiver would delay the process, and whether you recommend it?
So because this is a unique situation and it's going to be routed to HOB, the HAB, and we don't know how they're going to be handling those, I can just speak to how it typically is in practice, because we file I-912s all the time for different applications. Typically slows you down 1 to 2 months. It's really not recommended for crisis situation. I don't know if anybody has done one for a recent application and they got a turnaround. I haven't heard of that. So I'm going to assume that the 1 to 2 months stands.
And then a couple other questions on the fee waiver. Is there a chance of petitioning the administration, or is there advocacy being done to issue a blanket waiver of filing fees for this situation specifically?
Yes, lots of organizations, including Parks Equality Center, have done advocacy to get a blanket program.
And a couple more questions about financial sponsorship. Can you talk briefly about organizational sponsors?
Yes,
institutional
sponsors. You can have an organizational sponsor. I've never done one, to be honest with you. It's possible. Be creative, do the form, but the organizational sponsor has to provide their taxes and everything. I've heard of them doing, like, I've heard of this happening, but I've personally only done individual sponsors.
And can a US-based sponsor multiple Afghan family members or loved ones?
Yes, but like I said, it just goes back to their financial means. They can be one sponsor doing 20 applications.
And a couple of questions on sort of bigger picture. So one is, if a person is granted humanitarian parole and is still in Afghanistan, how do they show the proof of approved application? You know, can they use it? Can they show it on their cell phone? Do they have to print it out?
They should. It's been recommended by other groups that all their receipts, they keep it on their telephone, as well as keep a copy. And if they're going to the airport, for instance, they can have a secret pocket or sew something into their jackets with the receipts, or have a secret storage for the receipts, and then also on their phone, in case they get their phone taken away from them, they'll have hard copy and soft copy.
And then a couple questions on, you know, the rumors we're hearing is that the U.S. evacuation efforts might end, or will likely end by August 31st or Labor Day. Can you speak to how that would affect this process, or how this process would or will continue after the U.S. pulls out?
I think that it's too soon to speak on that issue, to be honest with you. All I can say is proceed to help people, because there's going to be other countries, including Canada and other countries, that are going to evacuate folks, and folks will be in. I'm really hopeful. I know we don't have much time left, but I'm very hopeful that folks will find a way out. And if they don't, that there will be an extension of time possibly. this shouldn't impede you from filing applications.
And I think those were the most of the questions we received in the chat. And we do want to save some time to talk through the logistics. Folks who are, who are going to be working with this group of volunteers to be paired with applicants, we want to save some time to walk through logistics with you. Are there any other questions for Seema on humanitarian parole before we transition into logistics? And also, you can feel free to contact us afterwards with questions. We don't need to get them all in right now. There's a question here about whether the repatriation form is required with the humanitarian parole application.
I mean, once you file the the humanitarian parole, and if you get the receipt number, you can guide the applicant, the U.S. person, to tell their evacuee family member or friend or whatever to go ahead and fill up those forms with that case number information. So that would be how that would work at this time. And then also I see here a question about how recent does the employer letter need to be. Look, you have to be really creative with these I-134s. They don't all have to be the same. I mean, if you look at my I-864s, they all have a different flavor to them. Basically, for instance, like you could have one person who doesn't have an employer letter, but they have like their company hiring letter, or whatever that's called. I forgot what that's called. I've just not been in corporate world long enough to know, but whatever that is, that letter, they can use that. They can use, their, if they don't have an employer verification, they could just do their last 6 pay stubs. That's cool. They can just do the 6 pay stubs and the taxes. If they want to put a couple of years of taxes just to be more secure because they don't have other information at this time. Another thing to mention, and it would be good if we could put it in the chat box, but if you Google tax transcripts, get my tax transcripts from IRS, it's sometimes easier for folks to download their taxes off their IRS account. If they order it by mail, it takes about 7 to 10 business days for it to be delivered, their tax transcript. So if you are just talking to someone who's frazzled, they don't have a copy of their taxes, they are able to go on the IRS website, create an account. If you Google the IRS tax transcripts, get my transcript, it'll walk you through 2 ways of doing it, by mail and by the IRS account. And they would actually, they would request what's called a return transcript. There's 2 things, an account transcript and a return transcript. They would request a return transcript.
So we want to thank you, Seema, so much for taking time and offering your expertise in the midst of a really hectic couple of weeks. We really appreciate it. And for folks in the chat, yes, the video of this training and the slides and the guides referenced will be made available. We'll be emailing you. They'll also be up on the ADEP website following the training. For anyone who is just joining to learn about the humanitarian parole process and get trained by Seema, you're welcome to hop off now, but we're going to transition into logistics for folks who are going to be working with us, with this group of people, to be paired with applicants for humanitarian parole. So feel free to hop off if you were just here to learn about humanitarian parole, and then please stay on if you're looking to be paired with humanitarian parole applicants. So maybe we'll just give people a few seconds. I see some folks hopping off. Okay.
I'd love to offer people like a 1 minute or like a 30-second like body break. I mean, just we're all holding so much, including Seema. Thank you so much, Seema, echoing the comments in the chat. And that was an incredibly helpful presentation. Even having asked you so many questions myself over the last few days, I've learned a lot.
Awesome. So glad to be of help, and thank you for all the volunteers, and thank you for the initiative. We're all a big family helping our bigger, wider family, and I'm really excited for all the different efforts. You're part of this effort. If you're part of another effort, we're all one effort. So glad to be a part of this, and good luck to everybody. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you so much, Seema.
So can I log myself off?
You are welcome to, yes.
Hey, everybody.
Thank you, Seema.
Sure, bye.
So Roxanne and I are going to walk us through some logistics of what happens now if you're looking to work with us, if you're looking for families and folks to help with humanitarian parole. So Roxana, you want to start us off?
Yeah, so we're going to talk through the matching process, basically